Good morning and welcome to Madeira. My name is Caroline and I'm going to be spending the next couple of weeks travelling around this gorgeous island with my other half Andy. This morning we've driven well up into the hills and the idea is we are absolutely going to be doing the 25 Fontes waterfall hike. It's supposed to be one of the most popular ones on the island, so we've got here nice and early. We arrived about 8:30 in the morning and we were not the first car in the parking lot, and as we've wandered on down the tarmacked road we've actually passed one couple walking back in the opposite direction, so I think some other people have had similar ideas but they've got here even earlier still. Well and truly up in the clouds, so it's providing some truly fantastic landscapes. We seem to be walking in amongst really old forests with moss and lichens growing all over it. It is a bit of a boring tarmacked road, but we're hoping that it is going to lead to some quite cool Levada walks, and once we've done the 25 Fontes we might then go off and do some other Levada walks too. Tarmac Road has now pushed us out onto the Levada walk. In comparison to yesterday's, it's so incredibly different. We've got really wide paths, and then the actual Levada itself is moving at a snail's pace. If we only do the 25 Fontes walk, it will be 13 kilometres. Oh, duck underneath the trees. It's going to be 13 kilometres, and the book that we're following is recommending that we allow at least 4 hours to complete it. We can hopefully do some of the other trails that are around here too. There is 300 metres of elevation, but that is to get back up. Obviously I'm doing 300 metres down at the moment. We've just had a slight break in the trees and bushes and we've looked out onto the most epic looking waterfall, really tall, and it feels almost like this cauldron wrapped around it. I know that this walk's called the 25 Fontes because the idea is that you should pass 25 waterfalls. I just assumed that that would be in the peak rainy season, and we're here at the end of July, so I figured a lot of them might be a little bit on the dried up side, but even if that's the only one that we see, it looks epic and I can't wait to get a little bit closer to it. This hike is proving to be pretty epic. You just look out onto the valley and you've got the rolling hills just bumping off of the sticking out bits of the mountains, and the flora in this part of Madeira is really different to the part that we were hiking in yesterday. It just feels a lot more green, a lot more lush. Some of the plants I feel like we maybe have in the UK. The fauna as well, to a certain extent. We've not seen any lizards, but they were everywhere yesterday, and it seems to be a lot more filled with birds here in comparison. We've been walking along quite a long section of Levada where it's incredibly narrow, and we've got right up behind a couple of girls and then there was a gentleman behind us. And it's super awkward because unlike yesterday where we could just hop up and kind of straddle the Levada to let people pass, this one's considerably higher, but every now and again they seem to have these platforms that are a little bit wider, so we've just pulled over, let the gentleman go past, and then we'll keep on going. I'd really ummed and ahed about whether I wanted to come and hike the 25 Fontes. I'd read very mixed reviews online and a lot of people were saying that it's just not worth the hype. I get that the initial walk down the tarmac road was a little bit on the dull side, and I do wonder if maybe back in history, before it became super popular, you were able to drive down, and because so many people were coming, there just wasn't the parking space anymore, and that's why they've put a barrier across the road up at the very top. Once we got off of that tarmac path and we started following that first Levada, which was super placid, it started to get really interesting. And for me personally, I loved how different today was by hiking underneath the tree canopies. Although Andy did say that from a photography point of view, he much preferred all of the vistas that Moinho and Nova had given him yesterday. Then actually getting to the main point of the hiking trail, which is where it's not one big waterfall, it's lots of trickles, and I suppose probably 25 if I'd stopped to count, where they're just percolating through the rock and then dropping out close to the bottom was spectacular. The colours were just amazing. You had a very turquoise water, but then they've also got some autumnal leaves that have fallen, so the yellows and oranges against the turquoise of the water was beautiful. And then the colour of the rocks, the green ferns that are growing out of the rocks, the whole thing was just really magical. And he's been up there taking photographs for quite some time now. I think he's really in his element. So whilst the actual hike to here wasn't the best from a photography point of view, I think that the end point is definitely good for photography. We arrived at almost the perfect time. There was one other couple at the waterfall upon our arrival, but then as we've stuck around to take photographs and do some videos, it has got incredibly busy, and I would say that there's probably about 20-25 people here. So if you're also reading reviews online that are saying it's really overrated and it's really busy, my recommendation would be come as early as you possibly can. We got to the parking lot at 8:30 this morning, and we were very slow in getting down because of stopping to do a lot of videography. But I think that if you were just to book it straight here, you probably could have the waterfall all to yourself. One guy did go for a swim in the water, and honestly, I do actually have my swimmers and towel in my backpack, but it's just very chilly up here in the mountains, and it is a bit of an overcast day, and I can't help but think that I'm not really going to warm up, so I think I'll save it for another time, another part of the island. All of that slope to get down to the waterfall means what?
An uphill on the way back via steps. Ow.
Ow.
And trees.
This trail that we walked down this morning, which we had completely to ourselves, we were able to take loads of photographs and video loads of things. We have passed so many people, and there's been entire tour groups. I feel like it's been the big 40-odd seater coaches that have come down with tour guides. I can understand why people might think that this hike is completely overrated. If you're only doing the whole thing with this number of people, yeah, it would be a bit disappointing. We had to climb up a whole load of steps to get from the lower Levada back up to this one that was super placid this morning. And as we got to the top, we saw a sign saying Risco, and it's only 0.8 kilometers. So we figure if it's not very far, we'll have a wander along. I am wondering if it might be to that epic waterfall that we saw earlier. But either which way, this trail is so much quieter than the one that we were on further down. There's this hike too where we've seen some kind of landslide that's happened, and some rocks have completely taken something out. Yesterday it was some of the metal barriers that were protecting us from the steep edges, and today it's been an entire tree. And it does now start to make me wonder, should we be a bit more wary when we're walking along these trails? Or is it that, I don't know, like the Madeiran government put out like closures on them perhaps if they think that they're going to be quite dangerous? I don't know. If you're watching this and you do, I would love it if you could just leave me a comment underneath. Is this something that we do need to be worried about, or would it be closed off? I think this trip is just turning into a thing of firsts. When we were in Funchal, it was the first time I'd ever ridden a toboggan down public streets with vehicles. And then we've come here, and I don't think I've ever seen a waterfall quite as tall as this one. It is spectacular. As always, we'll try and stop before lunch with a view, and today we seem to be also stopping for lunch with about 100 other people and also ridiculously tame birds. I came on this hike because I wanted to see the 25 Fontes, but I actually think that waterfall may have just stolen the show. There was a flat plaza with some seating on the edge of it, which was a perfect place to stop and have lunch. And because of the open space, it also gave me the opportunity to get the drone up in the air. Once I put it up, I could see that there was like a flat plateau with a lake before it then hit another waterfall, and I could see that there were definitely some people up there, and it has to be my guess that someone up on that high section of the waterfall must have had a drone, because they sent it out and started playing chicken with my drone and we're getting ridiculously close. It doesn't matter how great of a pilot they are, if they're getting that close, I'm landing it, but I'm really hoping that I've still got some pretty good shots. We're back onto the tarmac path again, and one thing that I'd forgotten to mention is that they do have minibus shuttles. It's €3 one-way trip, or you can pay €5 for a return. I think they can fit 16 people. There's a little bit of a queue as two just left a few minutes ago. They take you down as far as a cafe. I spotted this sign on the way down this morning, and given that the Levada Alecrim is just shy of 2 kilometers away and everything's been incredibly well signposted, the paths are super obvious because they all just follow the Levadas, and it's still quite early on in the afternoon. I'm gonna say we should take our chances here and go slightly off-piste and see what this has got to offer, and apparently it also takes us to a lake too. This part of the trail is just awash with these purple and yellow flowers. The yellow ones, on their own, they look a lot like dandelions, which we have so many of in the UK, and we definitely see as being weed. But here, it's almost like a tree, a really, really thin trunked tree. And then you've got these wide green leaves. Off of the center of those wide green leaves are these yellow flowers. And here they look really, really pretty. I don't know if they are dandelions, but they're just kind of like a Madeiran variety, but the yellow and the purple with the green and then the brown of the path, the colours that are going on at the moment are gorgeous. There's been an opening in the trees, but I'm assuming that we're probably crossing over a valley stream that would be gushing with water had we had heavy rains recently, but it's given this amazing view over the waterfall. This is the lake that the child brought us out to, Lagoa do Vento, and what we've realised is that it's the upper section of the waterfall that we had lunch at, but way down at the bottom of. It seems like the people who've made it out this far are the slightly more hardcore hikers. It doesn't seem quite as touristy. There certainly aren't any tour groups, and there aren't any families with super young children around here. But it's got a really nice chilled out feel to it, and quite a few people here have decided to go for a dip. For me personally, I feel like the weather's still way too chilly, and I just don't think I'd be able to warm up afterwards if I was to go in. Fish in this lake, like both big fish and tiddly little fish. And what gets me is that I'm obviously looking out onto this huge drop of a waterfall in front of me, And I know what the drop is like behind me because I've had lunch down at the bottom of that waterfall. And that says to me that there is no way these fish, like salmon, can just like jump up waterfalls when it's more trickling waterfalls rather than these thundering ones. So do they just live their entire life in this one lake? It's not a pond, I get that it's a lake, but it's not huge. So it's a very small world for these fish. It's a little bit earlier on when we come from the Casa do Rabaçal, and I saw this sign and I was like, oh, only 0.3 of a kilometre to the lake. And I was thinking, oh, that's no distance at all. And don't get me wrong, it's not that the sign lies, it's just what the sign fails to tell you is that 0.3 of a kilometre is about 95% up a staircase like this, which is what we've just come to the top of. And unfortunately, we're not going back that way. We're heading off to the Levada Alecrim, which is this way. And it's up another set of steps. It's still very much steps and has been relentless. Back down there I heard like the trickles of some water and I thought, oh, maybe that's the Levada, which obviously is on the flat. And it wasn't, it was just the trickling of like a tiny waterfall in a valley. I started this off saying, oh, it will be fine because all of the walks have been really well signposted and it's super obvious where the paths are. And I've got to this point and I'm like, uh-oh, SpaghettiOs, because there is absolutely no sign and we can either go that way or that way. And no sooner do we go that way, it forks off again. So we'll see if we get lost. I genuinely think that the higher up that we are getting, the steeper the stairs are getting. It's like they're mocking me. And what makes matters worse is my tummy is rumbling big time. It was worth it, and the breeze up here on top of this rock is absolutely gorgeous, and we are well and truly in the clouds. When we first popped up, it was thick clouds. You could barely make out any trees except for the ones right in front of us. And then as the winds just pushed the cloud, bit of blue skies come out. I've got sun on my face. I should probably put my sunnies on. That's the whole point of me having these. And you can really start to see like the hills behind me and the hills off like down heading towards the waterfall. I always say it's worth having to go up if it means that you get some kind of spectacular view. And I just thought we're headed straight back to the car park. So this is great. We have reached the Levada, which can only mean one thing. Given that the water is trickling very slowly in that direction, and I know that we need to go back in that direction to the car park, it means that it's going to be ever so slightly downhill, but mostly on the flat. And at least from this part, I mean, it curves pretty quickly, but at least from this part, it looks very flat and not rocky, because my feet are starting to feel it a little bit. Andy's once again in his photography element. The wind just keeps on every now and again pushing the clouds onto the Levada walk, and when it happens it's like something out of a horror film, and then the wind pushes it further uphill and it completely clears up and it's like it's happy days again. In my my first Levada walk video, I explained that the reason why there's paths alongside the Levadas is because people have to come and maintain them quite regularly. One of the things that I wasn't too sure about though was what kind of maintenance do they actually need. And having looked inside of a few different ones now, some of them seem to be a lot more mossy and green and overridden by plants, and others have been incredibly clear as though they've recently been cleared out. So I wasn't too sure if it was just that. But we've just gone and passed on this Levada a point whereby some of the side of the Levada wall has been damaged, so much so that water started spilling out onto the paths. If you know of any other types of maintenance that these Levadas need, I would love it if you could let me know in those comments below. And there I was saying Levadas are completely flat, and so we've got a lovely flat walk back to the car. And then we come along this point where there's like a full-on water flume of water going down. But the good news is that because we are following the water downstream ever so slightly, it means that if there are any more of those, there's no way that it's going to be going back up, because laws of gravity dictate that that just can't work. For the most part, this Levada has been really well shaded in by trees and other plants that have stopped it from being quite so scary looking downwards. But at this particular point, okay, maybe not like right at this particular point because there is a huge rock here, but at this particular point on the Levada walk, there is quite the drop off down the side. So if you do suffer from vertigo, this part might be a little bit on the scary side, but as with most of the Levadas that we've walked so far, if there are steep drop offs, they do tend to have quite good railings for like that safety support. Now that the sun's come out and there's this dappled sunlight coming through the trees, it feels like a completely different hike to the one that we were doing earlier. I think that the clouds have all just been really trapped in that valley that we were in where the waterfall was, and as we've started to come further and further out towards where the cars parked up, the clouds have completely dispersed. It's complete blue skies above us, but you can see the clouds still rolling in from that valley. And no sooner when the Levada disappears into the earth, I'm assuming that it goes into a tunnel, the car park comes into view. Yes!